lovely and a very, very invigorating topic today. It's not easy to be an entrepreneur. Can all of you see me and hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, lovely. So let's get right into this. This is open to any one of you. What was the entrepreneurship journey like for you? You know, if you could, if each of you could just say it and tell us in very short, how did you decide to become an entrepreneur, and what were the highs and lows for you? And also, please do start by telling us what business is yours, so that the audience gets to understand what is your entrepreneurial venture about.
Sure. So I'm Shezan, and I run a company called DesignCafé.com. We are a home tech business, and by that I mean that we are organizing the home interiors and home improvement space. Currently, I'm present in.
Shezan, if you don't mind, can I request you to speak a little louder to the mic? Viewers will be able to hear you.
I'm going to just get this closer.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So Design Cafe is currently in about 3 cities. We deliver 3 homes a day every day. We currently employ about 700 people. We raised about $30 million in capital. And our goal is to be India's #1 brand for home interiors and improvement. Our team does everything from your modular kitchen to painting to services across these cities. We started in 2015 and 2016.
Right.
The reason I think I became an entrepreneur is, I guess, just ambition, pure, just wanted to build something that would be more of a legacy for all of us. You can have a larger impact. So that was the reason, really, honestly, going to do something.
But do you have a family background in this? Did you not think it's tough running a business on your own?
Yeah, it's tough running a business on. I actually, we never thought it's tough. I just thought that this, honestly speaking, this would be a good way for me to kind of accelerate my growth and be in charge of my growth rather than depending on a promotion or XYZ. So it just became more of taking control and charge and saying, hey, what the hell anyway, you're young, try it.
So over here, let me just quickly ask the other founders over here. Can I ask Amit and Sumeet, did you also feel the same way? Was it the will to do something on your own and not be in a job, let's say ruled by your boss? That was also your motivation?
You can. Okay, let me give it a shot. So my entrepreneurial journey started about 11 years back, and I think that the trigger was the urge to build something of my own, of significance, and the passion for sports that actually led to my first venture, esports buy. And I think what I'm working on right now, ANS Commerce, is an outcome of the journey that started 11 years back. So I mean, if I have to put one thing on why I went on to become an entrepreneur, I think it was the urge to build something significant and something that you can relate to.
Okay. What about you, Sumeet? Did you not easy?
So I was clear from the first day to join the family business, and it's something you have been trained, and today we are learning in the world of coding where we are teaching children to do software outside. This is something a generation doing a family business inside the values and beliefs of the second generation and the third generation. So same way we have been brought up, and along with the studies, we got an opportunity to hands-on or getting the process and the systems in factories and other things. So when you look close to your father and uncles working together, you get this opportunity to grow together. Well, I joined business in 2005, and from 2005 to 2020, the journey has been great. At that time, we were doing approximate revenue of, like you can say, about 150, and today we are able to close at 5,000 plus a year. So it has been a tremendous expansion, proactive descriptions, and we are not known as now wire and cable company, but also in consumer durable brand. Of course, I took my own risk, not in being in a family business. I started consumer durable division in Kabel. I started a plant in Bangladesh along with my partners. I started electric scooter ventures, which has been recently launched, and message ventures where I'm investing in start and tech of light fidelity, which is the future world internet.
Okay, lovely. Sumeet, at this point, I'd like Shikha to jump in. Shikha, I'd love to hear from you.
No, thank you, Vani, and thank you for having me here. I'm the founder and CEO of House This. We're a home and lifestyle brand that offers coordinated textile and decor solutions for the new age Indian consumer. I started my sort of working life with Unilever way back, and it was quite a jump, getting into entrepreneurship. Quite serendipitous is what I say, but I've loved every minute of it, and I'm passionate about building a consumer brand in this space from India for the world. I have seen much too often that we have factories producing wonderful products for all brands outside, Pottery Barn, Crate and Barrel, and it's an inspiration for me that I don't know why we can't do it sitting here. So honestly, that's what drives me every day. And what I love absolutely about being an entrepreneur is just the concept of value creation in a business. When you do something, it's not just the money you make, it's the impact you have on the community, it's your employees, whose lives you can change. And even in the toughest of times, I think just the idea of being able to create an entire ecosystem and creating an organization that I'm proud of has really kept me growing. And it's wonderful to see where the brand has come with, now also going international this year, hopefully. So it's something we're very excited about. And I've loved every minute of it.
And you've been doing this for how long now?
Well, I did my first venture. I was actually just, like I said, straight out of Unilever, had a wonderful stint with them, was just supplying private label, sort of furnishing to all the top retailers in India. But I think my foremost sort of focus was building the brand. So it's been a decade now. And
you don't have any family background in this?
No, I do actually. So we have a business going back about 30 years. My parents were first generation entrepreneurs. They started this in very tough times, and they built the business from scratch. And I think that was a story that I want to emulate, to build something, right ground up. And that's what's kept me going.
Lovely. Thank you for that. Yash, you have a very, very interesting business. And tell us a little about LuxePass, and also tell us about how did you survive these COVID times?
Right. Thank you for having me, Vani, and nice to connect with all of you. So LuxePass started, just to give you guys an idea, it's an app, it's on iOS and Android, and a web platform where you can actually book hotel amenities without booking a room. So it's kind of like a day pass, and you can visit 5-star, 4-star, 3-star hotels, and you can use the swimming pool, the gym, the spa, the salon. So most of the facilities that are usually reserved for the in-house guests, as a city local, for as low as 300 to 500 rupees, you can go and use it for a few hours to a whole day. So I actually was always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I always wanted to, kind of innovate and have real life consequences for all my actions, because when you're sort of working under somebody, you're very well protected, and you also don't get to make offline decision making. So I wanted to sort of innovate and have, consequences, also be able to, it's a tremendous growth opportunity as well, just to, recruit talent, have a nice team that you sort of motivate every day and to grow together. So it was something that I always wanted to embark on. I actually was really frustrated that I wanted to use good quality facilities, and I wasn't a member of anything near my house. There wasn't a residential club near my house which had, there wasn't a pool that wasn't overflowing with people, or I could have privacy, or I could, sometimes the gyms or the spas weren't very well maintained. And I always wondered.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Yeah. Can you hold the mic? I think it's creating a little bit of the disturbance.
Okay. Is it
the mic that's creating disturbance, or do the others need to go on mute?
I think it's the mic. So if you can just hold it once, and we can figure that out so that we can hear you more clearly. Thank you.
Okay. Is it better now?
Yes.
Okay. So I wasn't a member of any residential club, and I always wondered that whether I could go to a hotel and use their facilities as a non-in-house guest. And in some cases, I was actually able to do so. And in some cases, I wasn't. But I kind of realized that this is something that hotels actually have. And either they haven't been able to market it, or there's no awareness about it. So I decided to cold pitch to all hotels and asking them if this is something that they would be open to. And of course, crowd control was an important issue that they had. And that's where the innovation kicked in, where we had some features such as, we had a security verification. We allowed backend softwares that would automatically adjust the number of Lux passes that could be sold depending on their in-house occupancy, and we had B2B softwares in place. We had strong terms and conditions. So it was something that they had to take a leap of faith, and but it worked out well. And so far it's been a smooth process, and that's how I came up with the idea, and that's how I launched. So it's been a really nice journey so far.
Your concept is fantastic, Yash. But what did you do in the last 5-7 months when nobody was getting?
Right. So we had a complete halt to all our sales for about 4 to 5 months during the lockdown. So recently, in the past 2 to 3 months, there's been a really good pickup of sentiment, and people are a lot more comfortable going out again. We kind of, kept constant communication with all our loyal customers that were there before the pandemic, making sure that, sometimes we would give them a free LuxePass, just to kind of remind them to sort of come back. And I know that it's the first sort of risk that they have to, to go back to the hotel where they will think twice, during the pandemic. But we were, of course, showcasing the sanitization levels of all our hotel partners, and really investing in our advertising and marketing, and really trying to give our customers a push to sort of go back and book again, and see that there are social distancing measures in place, and that it's been taken very seriously by all our hotels. So that's how we kept, but we kept put. Our burn rate was quite low, so we were able to sustain ourselves. And now I think that it's human nature to want to go out and experience things back again. I don't think that this is something that's permanently going to stop people from trying to resume their pre-COVID lives. And so I think we're well poised to sort of capture the bounce back that's going to take place.
Yash, I want to ask you, in those tough times when we didn't know how long this will last, and we hoped that maybe the next month it will open up, and then there were a second wave and the third wave, etc. Did you ever think, let me try winding this up and try something else?
I did have some questions where whether this would be an industry which investors would look at in the long run. So there were times where I was questioned that, maybe this is not the hot industry right now, and people may be looking at edtech and fintech and all of that. But then it's about just staying put and giving it, to not take impulsive decisions as an entrepreneur. You have to, before taking any sort of decision, you have to give it a few months to a few years. You cannot let one deviation sidetrack you completely. And honestly, if a worldwide pandemic has not made your model redundant, it means that there's always a long-term vision to take place, and nothing really can be a failure overnight. Even to fail, you need to put in the hours and the energy for years. So that's just the thing. And so far there has been a good pickup. So I would say
Do you
that.
ever have any pressure from home or close family and friends who said, Yash, tu kuch aur try kar le yaar?
Well, they did ask me a lot, how's it going? Like, what's your long-term plan? And they were subtly asking me that, ab kya tera kya hoega ab? But then it's I just sort of said that these are just tough times right now, and I didn't really comment too much. I just let the wave go by, and right now it's picked up again. So I'm I guess it's just I like the saying, strong opinions loosely held, which basically I wanted to say that, you have to have a lot of conviction in your idea, but also you need to be flexible and open to others' opinion. And as an entrepreneur, you should learn to take, healthy criticism. It's really important. Even if somebody criticizes your idea, you need to be open-minded and hear, and you need to, create a culture of constant feedback, even with your employees and everybody. So you're constantly adapting and innovating, because especially during these times, you really have to adapt.
Very well said. I must say, you carry a lot of maturity on seemingly very young shoulders.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I want to pull in Nitin now. Nitin, you had a very, very successful venture with Clove Dental, and you raised Series E monies, and you were terribly successful. And then you jumped ship from there to start Mom's Belief. Why would you want to lose something or move on from something that makes as much money, that is comfortable and successful, to doing what you're doing now, which sounds like you're going to make a huge impact? I mean, it sounds very, very difficult and meaningful, but you chose to move and make this difficult choice?
Thanks, Vani, and hi everyone. Thanks for joining in and hearing each other. So Vani, first of all, yes, Clove was good. Even after raising $125 million, we feel that we still short of cash. So there's no success per se in any of the venture. But yes, while working at Clove, there was a time, and it happens, I'm sure, with all of the fellow colleagues. The founder or the founder team management member, when the professional guys take over, they very less work. It's all on autopilot, like opening a clinic, hiring a dentist, getting the BD and all that. So there was something missing where I started an autistic center in 2016 or 15, where I saw the parent practically helpless sitting at the reception, and the child, an autistic kid, going inside the center, getting a therapy, and they have no clue what to do. And when they go back home, and they are even further clueless. If you're in tier 1, they'll do iPad, food. If you're in tier 2, they'll send it on the ground to play. So there was a huge gap I saw at that time, that we can help parents. At the same time, this entire industry was unstructured, just like dental world. You'll see dentists everywhere, every nook and corner. But we are the first one to start the corporate dentistry, and we saw the similar response. It's not possible. It works like this only, and so that's my mom's belief. And I have no personal background in special needs kid. It's just that I saw an opportunity, and frankly, a couple of investors back then, it was a no-brainer for me to do. And I'm still not executive, but yes, I'm still part of Move, but in a different mode and role, not a full-time, more of a review, if more of the shareholders. Nothing to do that I left Clove. But yes, there's always a backing that Clove is there. But I wanted to do something meaningful that will change, or do something that even if you're earning, it should be something that we made a change in someone's life.
So, for all of you, I want to ask you, being an entrepreneur requires a lot of drive. It requires a lot of conviction. It requires a lot of self-belief, because each one of you obviously believe you can make something of this business. But it's also tough. It's terribly tough, because you're managing your own P&L. At every stage, you have to figure, is this expense worth it? Is this going to be an investment? What is this going to get me? Did you ever have, choices to make where you felt torn between, I want to spend on this and yet I can't seem to afford it, or I wish I could land monies and I can't seem to, or I wish I had a more comfortable life? Like when I became an entrepreneur, mine was, I've been a corporate person all my life for 20 years. And just the fact that I didn't have a secchi, I had to make all of my bookings and manage a lot of things on my own was in itself a big shift. I had to let go of my driver. I had to start looking at my expenses, and I had to start thinking about, what if there were 5 months where I don't make any money at all? What would I do? Did you also have to make some tough decisions like those? I mean, not that mine were really tough.
I'd love to take that up if I could. Yeah.
Please do.
Actually, it's strange enough that right at the midpoint in my journey, it was one of the toughest times for me. We started off as being a very dominant offline player. We were with all the top modern retailers. And I tell this to everybody because I think it still pains me sometimes when I think about it. We were at, about 150 stores. And, it was great because obviously we were being able to reach the customer, but it soon became very clear to us that what we were trying to do, the brand identity we wanted to create, wasn't really reaching the right customer, and we weren't making money, plain and simple. So as much as the scale was fantastic, we know we could have taken it from 150 to 300. We had to pick our battles, and we said, at some point, to be able to sustain and survive, even though we'd love to be at, 300, 400 stores, we have to take a hard call. And that was one of the toughest moments. And thankfully enough, of course, we had online, which was coming up. And therefore, as a bootstrap company, we had to take a call, where are you going to put your money in? And we decided to go the digital first route. But I remember that being a very, very trying time. If I had probably more resources, I would have loved to have gone all guns blazing on all fronts. But a hard call had to be taken. Yeah.
Did any one of you also face that conundrum? Thank you so much for that, Shikha. Very well answered.
I like to chip in. So I think we as an entrepreneur, you face that every day, the choices of choosing one over the other. I think one of the major decision making for us happened when COVID hit everybody. Being in an e-commerce space, we were going at a very, very good pace, and we had an expansion plan in place. But the moment lockdown happened, supply chain got disrupted, demand came down, and suddenly you have to make the choice of whether you go ahead with the expansion plan that you have. What do you do with your cash flows? What do you do with the people that you have hired? And I think we took a conscious decision of retaining everybody, not doing any salary cuts, and we sailed through the tough times. And I think it paid off. Now that we are back into the e-commerce growth which is happening, and those are some of the relationships that you build when you stick around with as a team. And I think it pays off. So I think it's a learning. You make decisions. Some of them turns out to be wrong, some of them turns out to be right, and that's how you learn as an entrepreneur.
I must say, you demonstrated a lot of resilience, you and even Yash, in what you've done to survive through these times. It must have been very, very difficult. And I remember at a time when, I'm a part of a lot of entrepreneur groups, and everybody was discussing this on how, yes, it's the right thing to not let go of your workforce. And of course, we want to retain everyone. But when there simply isn't any revenue, when there simply isn't any cash flow, then despite all good intent, one might have to let go, because there just isn't money to pay people. So fantastic. I want to ask Sumeet. Sumeet, you've done a lot of stuff. You've managed various ventures. How did you take the decision? How does one take the decision of moving from one venture to another?
So I'm always risk, and this is what I love to do in my life. So once I got opportunity for doing Bangladesh as well. So along with my two colleagues, I went to Bangladesh, Dhaka. I convinced my chemical.
No, so first, Sumeet, tell us about the different things you have done. Let the audience know about
fair
many
enough.
things you've dabbled with.
Yeah. So 2005 to 2009-10, I was at our Kabel training there. So in the Silvassa, Vadodara, and other places. Then I convinced my family to venture into power cables, because we were known only into wires, and that's where the paradigm shift happened first time. I went to Europe and Turkey and many other countries to get the best configuration of the machines in India, and we built up one of the new kinds of wires, and thus we extended our ring. That was a huge decision, because we bought something that was not in India earlier. So that was one of the challenges I took, and I executed it within the budget. When in family business you work, as an entrepreneur, you go with certain budgets and you have to execute it within that limit with the right configurations of whatever.
So Sumeet, sorry, I'm interrupting you again. Tell me, how did you go from Make My Home, which you were doing in 2013, you then transitioned to electric scooters?
Yeah. So I will tell you.
What was that like?
Yeah.
And
so
how did you come about to take that decision?
Yeah. So what happened at that
Switching to electric.
Yeah. So MakeMyHome.com was again a great venture for me at that point of time. So again, we started with furnishing, and that time online was picking up. So of course, we know today online is the future. But the customer acquisition cost, what was causing at that point of time, and you go with certain stop budget losses. So we were very clear: if this budget fits up, I'm bootstrapping company. If I don't get of the investors, your wish is good, your dream is good, but at a certain point you have to go away from the emotion. This is very, very important. And keeping a moral high during the mortality period, we were trying that, but we tried 2 years, but it didn't work. So we decided. So at the same time, as a business person, you have to start laying the eggs in different baskets already. You have to be ready with that. And that's what we were doing parallelly, and we ventured into consumer durable division. That's what I started parallelly, because after 1 year, I realized immediately it requires a different ball game, different mindset. And I have to be ready with the next game plan as well. So luckily, I ventured into consumer durable. We built up in 5 years as a consumer durable brand. And it also got a lot of pain, and we got a very good valuation of more than 250 crores within 5 years.
Wow.
Great achievement for me and my team, my brother and everyone. And then 2019, what happened? Texas specific group, they came on the board, and they merged RR Kabel wire and cable and consumer durable division both. So, when this kind of American investors, they come on the board, they professionalize it, they completely. So we got little bit free, and that's what me and my younger brother, Hemant, we both decided. Let's venture into electric scooters. So it was his idea. We were discussing in the room. Let's do it. And for 1.5 years, suddenly we went. Now in COVID period itself, we were able to open 10 showrooms, and more 10 are on the way. So we are already now 800 bikes before March on the road itself. This is kind of working we are doing, and many more models are coming up. And this everything has happened during the COVID time.
Fantastic, Sumeet. Fantastic. So again, I must say you and your brother must be very, very dynamic, because you've gone from one venture, you've gone from furnishings to consumer durables to now electric scooters.
I'm venturing into the latest. I've done ventures into a company called now Light Fidelity. So Vani, in future, it's all about Wi-Fi and Li-Fi together, because light gives us internet at the speed of Gbps. So we have executed 3 projects in the rural internet where even the Wi-Fi cannot reach. And this we are with many of the governments of India right now. And very soon, after 2024, the technology build up like that. You will have a Li-Fi chip in your computer and mobile. And wherever you're sitting under the light, it will work through Li-Fi. And the rest of the places Wi-Fi. So this is the venture I've initiated. I have done in Ahmedabad. So parallelly, I work on many projects, and then I invest with MSME companies on new technology.
Fantastic, fantastic. So you made a very interesting point. You said one has to use emotions judiciously. You said one can't get carried away. One has to make objective decisions. Did any one of you ever feel like going back to or exploring the corporate sector? Did any one of you during your tough times feel, well, maybe I should try a job? Shezan, did you ever feel like that?
No, can't do that. You're just so used to being in control, for lack of a better word, to be honest with you, that it just didn't feel less exciting. Not that anything wrong with doing a job, actually speaking. It just would feel that the pace of decision making that we're used to go back, where decisions then have to be done by committee or by 2 or 3 people. I guess that's the real problem. I honestly would love a job that pays me a few $1,000,000 a year if I could, take that with me. But so I guess, I don't think that's crossed my mind. Also, I'm not very employable, so that also helps.
No, that can't be true. Did any one of you ever feel like winding up? Did you ever have such a difficult time when you felt, let me try something else? Sumeet comfortably moved from one to the other, but did you ever feel like winding up?
I think I'll give it a shot. So I think in my case, it was more about the choices that were available. So in my first venture, we actually built India's first sports e-commerce portal back in 2011. I mean, there was no Amazon, Flipkart was selling books, and Snapdeal was just a deal site at that time. And we were way ahead of our times. And
what is a sports e-commerce portal? What does that mean?
So it's a portal for buying any sports related products, services, etc. So we used to sell sports goods, equipment, and we were scaling organically. We were bootstrapped, no funding available, and at the time when Snapdeal pivoted from being a deal site to an e-commerce, we had an we got an acquisition offer for a 24-year-old getting acquired by one of the e-commerce majors. Sort of turned out to be the choice that I took because it was a choice between not scaling and dying its natural death, or getting acquired by and seeing your vision scale. So I think sometimes it's about those choices that you make, which eventually drives the decision making. But for an entrepreneur, I think the core of the heart remains problem solving. The core of it remains building something of significance. That's what I feel.
Wow.
One point I want to add though on winding up.
Yes.
I have nothing against winding up, by the way. I think that we have to be very, like Sumeet mentioned, it's all of us want to build businesses that will scale, right? And I tell this to other entrepreneurs who are starting out, say, it's like in a way digging for oil. So if you have the best equipment and the best team, but you're digging in Pakistan, you're not going to find oil. You have to dig in Saudi Arabia. So after digging for a while, if you realize that hey, I've got the right team.
I'm sitting in Pakistan.
And
you've got to stop.
Up, right? And go to Saudi Arabia.
Right.
So if at some point I realize that there's no depth to the market, or
right.
that $1 billion vision that we have, then I would wind up. So it's a matter of being that unemotional about what you're doing and saying, listen, as long as we keep hitting our milestones quarter on quarter and we see the room, I'm going to make it work. And of course, there'll be like COVID was a bad year, but the fundamentals of the market don't change. But
yeah, very well said. Very well said. And like Sumeet was saying, one has to be careful about how one uses emotions. One has to be emotionally attached to the business, and that's how you survive the tough times. And at the same time, you have to be objective, and I'm going down the wrong path. When is it time for me to move on and do something else, as Sumeet did? What about funding?
I would actually just like to add one point.
Yes.
As Shezan said, about the digging oil, it's a really good analogy. Most of the time, it's okay to not be successful in your first venture. The average age of a successful entrepreneur is usually above 40. And, although this is my first venture and I'm in my 20s myself, if there are any young entrepreneurs watching or any young aspiring entrepreneurs, it's much easier to also take a risk in your 20s and while you're young. When you're single, you don't have a family or any kids and you're well settled. So that's just something to keep in mind. Going back to a job is something you can always do. And, but not on some level, it's really important to gain entrepreneurial experience in your life early on if you're also wanting to, if you're going to have multiple ventures and you want to sort of be a successful entrepreneur eventually.
Very well said, Yash. Very well said. Soon after I left Pepsi, I met this gentleman. He has a brand called Poppycorn.
Yeah.
And his company, the company is called Timla.
Okay.
It's a very strange name for a company, Timla. Like, how did you land this name? So he said, Timla actually stands for "This is my last venture."
Okay.
So Timla is "This is my last venture." I said, what's the story behind that? He says, I've tried so many things.
Yeah.
I have moved on and found that I couldn't stick with anything. My family didn't give up, you've got to stop doing this.
Yeah.
So he says, that's how I landed with this name, to tell my family this is really my last venture. That's why this company is going to be called Timla.
That's amazing.
Because he tried so many things. Okay. So I was coming to this question on funding, so every entrepreneur is faced with this conundrum. And I'd like you to tell me if when I speak with entrepreneurs often, at a very early stage, they're asking me, can you help us land funding at a very early stage? But landing equity funding also means giving up on equity share. Is that a conundrum any one of you have faced on should I manage, bootstrap and manage with frugal resources rather than going out and getting money?
I think if I could go, I've wrestled with this for the last couple of years. It sounds atrocious. I think I should have made up my mind long ago. And actually, we were looking to raise capital last year at this time, and everything, of course, fell apart. But I think it's for me. I just want to say one quick thing, that it's important to know at what point you need it. I do understand that, and funding has become in a lot of ways a stamp of approval. It's so as you should seek it only for the right reasons, because ultimately money is the fuel. It's not just that you have to be a funded enterprise. It's important to recognize it gives you the mileage to do more. So when it is the right time, you seek it. So I think with us, even though I wrestled with, I'm a solo founder, so I really had to think in terms of various aspects, right? Because with funding and who's the partner you get in, I think I'm happy that I took the time, even though I judged myself for it at some point, because I am now going to the market because I truly believe that, we've got the right idea. The prototype is correct. We're completely clear with how the brand is evolving, and this is the right time. So I would just say that, even if it takes a little longer, just do it at the right time. You don't want to be in a place where you're stuck with the wrong people or with too much money or too little because you've not got the best deal for yourself. Yeah.
Absolutely. In fact, every venture that gets funding is so highly celebrated. There are a whole lot of news headlines, and in all the entrepreneur groups, everybody is high-fiving and, there's but like you rightly said, I mean, finally, it's actually not, proof is not in lending the money. Proof is actually in lending business on a consistent basis. Sanjeev Bikhchandani always says this, that, you'd rather have the consumer's money than the investor's money. You want a business that's running. You want regular stream of revenue. Having investor money is not proof that you're going to have a running business.
It's a means to an end, right? It's not
exactly
itself. So, I mean, it has to work for everyone at the right time in a different way. That's what my experience has been. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very well said.
Something I want to add.
Yes.
Some amount of capital. So, there are two parts to raising capital. One, obviously, is the money, and that, having, as an entrepreneur, you always want to make mistakes, right? We all have made them, and we continue to make them. Having enough cash in the bank allows you to have the room to make mistakes and continue to live on. Otherwise, your business could die a premature death because you don't have capital.
Right.
So if you're an entrepreneur and you believe that your business can survive 2 or 3 mistakes, 2 or 3 ups and downs, then don't raise capital. One. But if you believe you need capital it's almost like you're shooting for the goal. If you can get 3 shots at the goal, it's better than 1 shot at the goal, right? So the capital kind of gives you an extra shot at the goal. That's one. The other thing we found, the investors that we have, so we raised with the VC called Fireside Ventures. And then we got a private equity investor called Westbridge Capital. Right? And what we learned is, apart from capital that comes in, the knowledge of having successfully built companies and being on the board, like Westbridge has, I think 40-50 companies there that are public. So the knowledge sharing that you get and the access to how they think, building a business, because we've never been to that scale or seen that scale, and that knowledge of just not avoiding the potholes is far more important
than the money.
The capital, because capital will come and go very easily, especially in the COVID year. So we should really, I think, looking for capital is very important, to find the right capital, and if possible, find patient capital. A lot of times investors go and you don't ask enough questions to the investor. And the first question I would ask the investor is, how long is your fund? Right? Because investors, if you're investing in fund 1 and then the 5th year of a 7-year fund, in 2 years they don't want to exit. So these are some of the subtleties that you look at in look for money, so that you know that your vision is 7 years, and your investor has to have the same 7-8 year vision.
Very helpful. Very helpful. Do any one of you have a co-founder? Nitin, do you have a co-founder?
No, I don't have a co-founder. No, not in this way.
Amit and Shezan have.
Yeah, I've got 3. I've got 3.
You've got 3. Okay.
Yeah, we have 4 of us.
You don't have co-founders. So I want to ask Sumeet, Nitin, Shikha.
No, I have co-founders, of course.
Sorry?
Yeah, we have co-founders, of course.
You have co-founders. Yes, you have your brother you mentioned. So from Nitin, Shikha and Yash, did you ever feel alone? Like, do you ever feel, oh gosh, I'm making these big decisions, and am I doing the right thing or the wrong thing? Have you ever felt very alone?
So I'll take this one. So yes, definitely there are certain operational things and strategic decisions where you feel not alone, but someone to share your part of your work and worry as an owner. Yes, you have, like in my team, I have people from Clo for last 10 years. They're working with me, 15 years. There are those folks, but you can entrust only a certain thing. But the thing you can share with co-founder, how much funding, which investor is saying what is the MIS required, and what is the next step. These all things can only be discussed with someone close. So we do have mentors and guides, but at the end of the day, they have limited time. They have so many companies to take care of. So yes, at times co-founder feels good, but on the flip side, I've seen in previous also, not at Clo, but other firms, after a certain stage, the co-founder things start getting shaky. This is my experience. Purely because the roles and responsibility gets diversified, and invariably one person needs a one level up in terms like we need to have a new tech CTO and the person is junior. So these all things comes up. But yes, I do feel that there should be someone to back up or sounding board, even at a trivial operational level.
Yeah, I would completely agree with Nitin. I think I've missed having a sounding board at many a point. And I think it's also what you bring to the business, right? You would love to bring everything, but I think every person does have a strength and a skill. And if you have two people who complement each other, as I've seen in tours where one person maybe is taking on one ownership of one thing, I think it makes a huge difference. This is something, in fact, I'm considering now as I'm growing the brand, because you need to get the best from each person. And I don't think you can have your energy diffused on multiple functions, right? That doesn't serve the business well. So yes, I think I've certainly felt lonely, but I'm hoping to correct it soon.
I also completely agree with Shikha and Nitin. I'm a sole founder, and I would say that especially in the early stage, it's really important to have co-founder, and like Shikha said, have a sounding board. It really helps with a lot of things, even with funding and attracting investors, because for them, early stage investments really rely on the idea and the founding team mainly, right? If your idea is scalable, they also do want to tick mark the check boxes that they have to allocate their funds, and then they're answerable to their investors who've invested in their fund. So it's it's very important. And although you may have employees that you're really close with and you talk everything about, but just having somebody's skin in the game, which in terms of equity is very different from somebody who you're paying a package to, because just having the skin in the game really makes it pushes them the extra mile, and just you can share literally everything with them, and there's certain issues that somebody who doesn't have their skin in the game will not understand.
Correct.
So I really do think that's something that everyone should look out for, a really good founding team. And there's no hurry, because I think funding is just a byproduct. If you have a good founding team, a good idea, your funding will follow, and people will compete to outbid each other for your to invest in you. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. Now I want to ask Shezan, Amit and Sumeet. In Sumeet's case, it's your brother, right? So the equation is different. But with Amit and Shezan, did you or have you signed a co-founder agreement, or if not, have you ever considered signing it? And were there points in time where you felt, gosh, he and I or she and I think very differently?
So I agree, she and I think very differently, but she's my wife, so it's bound to happen. And no, I haven't signed a co-founder agreement with her. I should.
Yeah, well, with your wife, it's different. Yeah, I can imagine. What about you, Amit?
So, this is my third venture. So I've learned from my last two experiences. So yes, we have co-founder agreements in place. And the three of us, we three come from very different background. And that's the beauty of it, because we're building something which is a full stack, where we have technology, we have performance marketing, we have warehousing. We are trying to build a multi-city warehousing solution, and we've got marketplace management. So all aspects of e-commerce we're covering under one umbrella. So it helps when you have people from different skill sets. It helps when you come from different wavelengths. And all of us, all four of us are very professional about it, and we sort of go about driving our pieces very, very efficiently.
Fantastic. And Shezan and Sumeet, I want to ask you, for you, does it also get very overwhelming at times, since your business partners are also your family members? Is this the only conversation that happens at home?
Not exactly like that. We have a difference of opinion also while working together, right? And so, but at the same time, there's a beautiful statement we say within ourselves as a family. हमारे बीच में मतभेद है, लेकिन मनभेद नहीं है. It's a very important point where you have a right bonding in the business, and it's a bonding which lasts, not the binding. So let it be not brother relationship or whatever relationship you have. There should be great bonding in the like what we have employees working with us. It's a bonding which it's not a binding which is. So we certainly work on this emotional fortitude traits, which is very, very important in the family as well as in the. Although, but living at the same home with brother, yes, that's something I am sure Shezan must be facing. That dining table is also your boardroom. So this is you have to control yourself. Okay, we are not talking on the same topic. Of course, there's a difference of opinion, but yes, So we believe in either I convince you, either you convince me, but we have to be on the one. That's very important.
Okay.
We have a line, so like a physical. So we drive from office to work, and there's a road, and we cross that road, and then there's no talk about work.
Wow.
We had to do that the hard way, but a few years back, I said, okay, the moment you cross this road, there's no more work mode. Only we're not going to talk about work. And you, on the way back from home to work, you cross that road, and then you can talk about work. So we found out a way of making sure we have enough time.
Okay, that's tough. That's very, very tough.
No, it's fun.
I think you've been able to do that.
It's a lot. You do it, yeah. It's a lot of fun also. I wouldn't do it any other way, to be honest with you. A lot of people tell me, you spend so much time. Your wife's your co-founder. It must be. It's not actually, and it helps that she's smarter than me, obviously. So that also helps. So yeah, I think I wouldn't have any other way actually, to be honest.
Fantastic. Okay, now I'm going to ask you. I have vested interest in asking you this. But this is again something that I speak to a lot of co-founders, a lot of founders, a lot of entrepreneurs about, which is this conundrum of dealing with the idea of building a brand at early stages. Was this also something that you considered? Because for most founders, and rightly so, they're concerned with building a business. You want to make sure you have so much. A business is so much. It's about making sure that your supply chain is intact, you have a market, you're looking for investment. There are a zillion things to deal with. You want to just get the basics of business in order. At that time, how does one deal with the idea, or do you actually give sufficient importance to the idea of building a brand at an early stage? How do I make sure that my brand stands out and is differentiated versus all other brands? Am I building an intangible asset also? Do I think it's important to invest in building an intangible asset at an early stage?
I've actually learned that the hard way. I didn't do that well enough in the beginning. And I think it's a very fine line, and it's a tough ask because when we started, I told you we were doing private label as well, and we continued doing that because we felt that's good money for the business. It's a cash cow. It's doing that. But there's something of an inherent DNA and culture of the company. If you do it too long, the people you're working, they get used to that vision, and then they're working towards that. And we didn't give the brand. We should have corrected ourselves a little bit at some point, maybe a couple of years before, and started investing in the brand, which we're doing now, and it's serving us very well. But I think it's a very, like I said, a very tough line. Everybody will have different milestones for it. But if you speak from a consumer brand, it's so important to start, investing in that. I would not say one because there are limited resources, but at a certain point, we have to have that goalpost saying we need to start building the brand. Otherwise, you are essentially commoditized, and that's the greatest disservice you can do yourself. Yes. So I have learned that the hard way, and I would just tell everybody, keep it as a goalpost. You can't define when that would be, but it has to be something you're mindful of before it runs away from you.
Vani, for me, it's different aspects which decide this decision. So it's very important. So it's like first day itself, you have to be clear whether you want to earn money or you want to earn value, where the brand is. So this is where the decision starts. And the second, you have to decide the product placement, whether you want to become a Maruti or you want to become a Mercedes. So you have to take that route where the brand has to be built up and all the GTM, RTM strategies has to come along with that. It is very important. What's your product placement? Now, there are two examples live in the world, like Facebook or Google. They don't do much ad, right? It's on the technological side. So they focus on technology, and then people adopt it and they become a brand. The other way is like getting a soap brand like Lux and X, right? It doesn't have much features in the product, but you require other things for the branding. So it's all the aspects, all the metrics has to be formed further, and then you have to decide, okay, which route I have to take and what kind of money investment I have.
But Sumeet, you'll be surprised at the amount of money Facebook and Google do spend on advertising, on their own advertising.
Yeah, but on their own, so much like.
I want to tell you guys that building a brand is not actually advertising only. Is this something that you also experienced or dabbled with? The fact that building a brand is actually not about spending tons of money. It's actually not about advertising. Building a brand is about getting simple elements right. Like how you deliver your services is also part of your brand, because a brand is nothing but a consistent customer experience. If you're able to deliver a consistent customer experience each and every time, then that is a brand. It's nothing more than that.
And I also, I would like to add that, I really believe in the 80-20 rule. If you want to hit those numbers, most of your profits are going to come from repeat users. And that only happens if you are going to, really retain your customers and get them a good experience. Because repeat use case is going to make you really hit those numbers. You're not going to get so many people just trying your product just once and leaving, right? So it's really important. And that's why Apple is one of the biggest companies in the world, because 80% of the profits are usually coming from 20% of their customers. So yeah.
Fantastic.
I think I like to give it a shot. So in our case, since we are in a B2B business, our clients are brands that works with us. They are our end customer. What we focused on was more around making sure that their success stories are coming true. And I think in our kind of business, it is more important that you focus on your customer success and rest everything follows. And in the last 4 years of our journey, I mean, we are now working with more than 100 plus brands, and we didn't have any sales team. All these brands came from references. They came from one brand referring to the other. We actually ended up hiring our first salesperson last year during the COVID times to accelerate the growth. And I think that for an aspirational brand where you're trying to build a product out for somebody, or you're trying to serve somebody's aspirations, it is important to also keep it in mind, the brand identity, so that people can relate to it, people can get aspire and sort of get your vision. So it depends upon business type also.
Yeah, not just an aspirational brand. You could be the lowest value product, and in fact, being a lowest value product, perhaps in a commodity business, it becomes even more important to be able to have a brand so that consumers you versus anyone else. But thank you so much, guys. It's almost time, and I want to say a big thank you to all of you for a very, very spirited discussion, and we touched on various aspects of entrepreneurship. All of you participated. We talked about funding. We talked about the emotional resilience that it takes to be an entrepreneur. We talked about branding, about dealing with the dynamics of being lonely versus dealing with co-founders. It's been a fantastic discussion. Thank you so much.